Stanford University.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Tia Ridge, founder and director of Stanford Medicine's Contemplation by Design program. We're grateful to our speaker, Chissell, who will be speaking on merging science and contemplative practice for climate action. As Senior Director of New Initiative Drawdown Communities, Chissell leads efforts to produce informational programming and guides to support local collective climate action. These efforts focus on scaling adoption of Project Drawdown solutions in a way that values the well-being of all people and nature. Chissell has a multidisciplinary background in law, environmental science, business, and nonprofit stewardship. She has close to 2 decades of experience advising elected and appointed state and municipal officials in a range of subject areas, including solutions to environmental problems. She holds a JD from the University of Maryland School of Law, an MS in environmental science from Johns Hopkins University, an MBA from the University of San Francisco, and a BA in journalism from Howard University. We welcome Chissell as she leads us and inspires us toward climate action. We warmly welcome you, Chissell.
Thank you so much, Tia, and thank you for that great introduction. I'm really happy and excited to be joining the Contemplation by Design conference. I think that contemplative practices are such a wonderful supplement to climate action, a great foundation. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today. So I'd like to begin with us taking a few breaths and thinking about a place on Earth with which we feel a connection. Maybe a place that where we've spent a lot of time or only a short time, but had a great impact on us. And take some time now to feel that connection. So I'd like to share a bit about a place that is special to me. So as a child, I had the privilege of spending my summers at Highland Beach on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And this gave me the opportunity to be connected to a beautiful place and to observe over time an estuary, wetlands, changing shorelines, and the animals, fish, and birds that were native to that area. And this was the experience that formed my interest in the environment and my passion for protecting it. But there's more to this story. So now this is an aerial view of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation headquarters. Geographically, it sits next to Highland Beach on the Chesapeake Bay. At the very top of this image, you can see Black Walnut Creek and then Highland Beach on the other side of the creek. The building sits on the former site of the very popular Bay Ridge Resort, which was built in 1879 and was known as the Queen Resort of the Chesapeake. In 1892, Charles Douglas, the son of the famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass, visited the Bay Ridge Resort, hoping that he and his wife could have a meal and a place to stay, but they were turned away because of their race. They took a stroll down the beach past the Bay Ridge property, and they had a chance encounter with the owner of the land neighboring the resort. And Charles Douglas saw the opportunity to purchase and develop the site as a vacation community where Black Americans could escape Jim Crow and the restrictive covenants that prevented Black people from purchasing property. Now, Frederick Douglass went on to build a summer home in the community known as Twin Oaks, which has had a historical renovation and is now preserved as a museum. And that community is now the incorporated municipality of Highland Beach, where generations after Frederick Douglass's time, I developed my love of the environment, and where that passion has been intertwined with my heritage as an African American. Now, I'd like to shift to talking about climate solutions and about Project Drawdown's work and analysis of climate solutions. So before we discuss climate solutions, let's talk just a bit about the science of climate change to provide the context for talking about climate solutions. Now, as you probably know, increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere trap the heat from the sun, and have led to global warming. And over time, this warming affects weather patterns and results in climate change. Now, there are several gases called greenhouse gases that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere. And that's the reason for the name greenhouse gases, because they trap heat and create this greenhouse effect on Earth that causes average global temperatures to rise. Carbon dioxide is the most prevalent of these gases. It's released when we burn fossil fuels and when we burn organic matter such as trees. Methane is released from landfills, from the processing of fossil fuels, oil, gas, coal, and it's also released from the digestive tracts of grazing animals. It has smaller concentrations in the atmosphere, but it's 84 times more potent. So it's a very important greenhouse gas to focus on. Nitrous oxide is released from fertilizers and from animal manure. It's 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And the refrigerant gases that we use in our refrigerators and air conditioning systems, these are fluorocarbons that are thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide. So in looking at climate solutions, it's important to keep in mind that we want to address this full range of greenhouse gases. Even though we talk mostly about carbon, we're looking at the full range of greenhouse gases. Now, human activity has increased the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. About 25% come from our electricity production. An equal amount, about 24%, comes from our food, our agriculture, and land use. 21% comes from industry practices, another 14% from transportation, 6% from buildings, and another 10% from energy-related emissions, such as the processing of fossil fuels. Now, here's another way to look at it. This gray box represents Earth's atmosphere. And these bands on the left side represent all of the types of human activity that send greenhouse gases up into the atmosphere. Now, some of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is removed by natural, biological, and chemical processes that are called sinks. So about 24% is removed by plants and trees through photosynthesis. And then that carbon is stored in plants, trees, and soils. And another 17% is absorbed by the oceans through chemical reactions in the water and through the photosynthesis by algae and phytoplankton. But currently, the majority of greenhouse gases, about 59%, remain in the atmosphere. And so this is what we need to address. Now, what is drawdown? Drawdown is the point when greenhouse gases in Earth's atmosphere begin to steadily go down each year. So on this slide, you can see the red line going up, 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 levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere going up over time, continuing today. So one goal could be to just slow that rise or to stop it at a particular point. But Project Drawdown is naming a more ambitious goal for the world to reach drawdown, this blue dot, the moment of drawdown. So we have not, this is where the concentrations of greenhouse gases will begin to decline. And we have not yet reached drawdown. Greenhouse gas levels have been increasing, especially during the past 60 years. But this blue dot, the moment of drawdown, is the turning point when the increase stops and begins to go down. That's a future point in time. And this is what will begin to lower the average global temperatures. Now, when we reach this moment of drawdown is yet to be determined. It depends on a number of factors, how fast we act and to what extent we act. And we'll discuss more of that. Now, how do we achieve drawdown? This is what Project Drawdown's work is all about. So we've been working on answering this question of whether it's possible to reach drawdown using solutions that already exist and are already in use without any invention of new technology, only solutions that are currently in hand. So we have had an international team of researchers and analysts working on the answer to this question since 2015. And our team has conducted a meta-analysis of all of the current worldwide research and data about climate solutions. And our team has also done predictive modeling to project whether it's possible to reach drawdown by the year 2050. And we've done this meta-analysis and modeling for about 80 different practices and technologies to date. Now, drawdown solutions are technologies and practices that reduce greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere. They're specifically the technologies and practices that reduce greenhouse gas levels. There are many ways to take environmental action, many things that benefit the environment, but these solutions, the drawdown solutions, are specifically focused on lowering greenhouse gas levels. Now, the drawdown solutions do not include even every climate solution that currently exists in the world. The solutions that are included in our analysis are categories of technologies and practices that, as I said, reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, but also for each solution included, there is scientific consensus that's backed by data that they are currently available, financially viable, have a proven potential to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and there's sufficient data and study about these solutions to be able to model their potential at a global scale. So all of the drawdown analysis is based on global data, not specific to any country or region of the world, but what is possible on a global level. Now, there are no silver bullets included here, no theoretical technologies, nothing that's still under development. and nothing that can't be scaled or increased around the world. Now, new technologies and practices, either already developed or yet to be invented, once they are developed and viable and proven by data to be viable, then those can be added to the analysis and will help us to reach drawdown faster. Now, this analysis also does not include policies, regulations, incentives, no theories, doctrines, or ideologies, or financial mechanisms that could help accelerate the adoption of these solutions. Those are assumed to be in place. So that's a large area of climate action that is underway and where assistance is needed. But that's not what we're analyzing in this analysis. So climate solutions already exist. They're already in practice, and their adoption is growing around the world. So we're not starting from scratch with climate action, but these solutions must be aggressively expanded worldwide in order to reach drawdown. So Project Drawdown has outlined a system of solutions that, taken together, can reach drawdown while also providing benefits to human health, ecosystem health, financial savings, and improve opportunities for people around the world. We categorize them into 3 categories: reducing the sources of emissions that are going up into the atmosphere, supporting the natural sinks and the natural processes that draw carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and then a solution that is focused on improving society. I won't be able to go over every drawdown solution, but I wanted to give a sample so that you could get an idea of the range of solutions that are included. So in the electricity sector, solar photovoltaics, I'm sure that everyone has heard about solar panels and may even have them. LED lighting, a very accessible solution. In the food, agriculture, and land use sector, reduced food waste. This is one of the solutions with the largest potential for reducing greenhouse gases, because there's such a large amount of food that is wasted around the world, particularly in the United States, where it's estimated that about 1/3 of food is wasted, and so that food that's wasted rots in landfills and produces methane. And in addition to that, all of the energy and resources that go into growing and producing and packaging that food is also wasted. So there's a huge potential here. And a plant-rich diet is another of the largest potential solutions, because it addresses reducing the amount of meat that you eat, particularly if you are in a wealthy country and you're a well-nourished person. If you're able to reduce your meat eating by half, this has a large potential to reduce methane and the carbon dioxide that's released from the factory farming of meat. And even more importantly, or equally as important, is that it reduces the need to cut forests in order to provide more land for grazing animals or growing food for grazing animals. So this is a very huge potential solution that is actionable in everyone's life, but has broad-reaching implications. Silvopasture is an example of an innovative way to raise cattle, where they graze underneath trees that produce fruit and nuts. And land that's used for silvopasture has been shown to sequester or absorb more carbon than land using traditional grazing practices. Regenerative annual cropping is another agriculture-related farming practice that involves no use of pesticides, no tilling of the land, and other regenerative practices. In the industry sector, Addressing refrigerants is a very large solution because it helps to prevent release of the potent fluorocarbons when air conditioners and refrigerators reach their end of life. In the sector of land sinks, forest protection is so very important. Health and education is another solution that Project Drawdown has analyzed, and this means providing access to quality education as well as reproductive health care. This is a rights-based solution that has as its primary benefit opportunity and improved life for people around the world, but also can have a potential climate benefit. In the transportation sector, electric bicycles is an example of a solution that can replace trips by car. And bicycle infrastructure, which helps to enable more bicycle riding instead of car trips. Telepresence, which we're doing right now, is another drawdown solution that has seen much faster growth since the start of the pandemic. And in the category of coastal and ocean sinks, coastal wetland protection is an example of a drawdown solution. In the building sector, clean cook stoves is a solution that has so much potential to improve human health. Millions of people around the world cook on stoves that burn charcoal, wood, and other soot-producing fuels. And the people who use the stoves breathe this in and face shortened lifespans, as well as lung disease and other health problems. So the primary reason to promote clean cook stoves is to improve the health of millions of people, but it also has a huge climate benefit by preventing the release of black carbon. Green roofs is another example of a building solution. Now, I hope that you will be encouraged to learn more about the 80 climate solutions that are part of Project Drawdown's analysis. You can find all of this information at drawdown.org. You can see the full lists of solutions, information about each solution, technical summaries about how it was analyzed. You can see ranked lists of solutions along with the projected amount of greenhouse gases they're projected to reduce by 2050, and much more information, including a Climate Solutions 101 video series. So I highly recommend all of the free resources that are available at drawdown.org to learn more about climate solutions. Now, I'd like to pause my slides for a moment so that we can talk about contemplative practice and how I think it can support climate action. So I think that staying grounded in contemplative practice is a tremendous advantage for climate action. So we can use our practice as a refuge, as well as a place to draw on internal power to change our habits and lifestyles. Because even though all of the burden is not on us as individuals to solve climate change, there's still a great deal we can do, and it will involve changing our habits and lifestyles. Aside from that, climate change is not something that can be solved overnight. So we will continue to see the effects of rising temperatures, the storms, wildfires, and other effects that I'm sure you're familiar with from the news. We need our practice so much to be able to stay grounded as we face these difficulties and help others to face them. So I think that practice also gives us the capacity to look at which emission producing habits we are holding as sacred and where we're not willing to change. So often we might think, well, I really want to do something about climate change, but I don't think I want to give up my car, or I don't want to quit eating meat, or some other thing that we may not realize is actually something that we can change. And I think that the self-reflection that practice can give us can help with making these changes. Now, another reason I think that practice is useful is because climate change raises such intense emotions. It's a huge global issue that, unlike anything I think we've ever faced as humans up until now. And I think that this raises all sorts of emotions. Now, I'm not going to begin to tell you what sort of feelings you should have about climate change or which emotions are most useful for taking action. We are, each of us, complex human beings. We have a range of emotions. And because of our life experiences, none of us will react exactly the same to any situation or be motivated in exactly the same ways. So I want to encourage you to trust your own mind. And contemplative practice builds that capacity in us. Practice gives us the capacity to be present with our feelings, including whatever comes up around climate change. And this presence can help us to, stay engaged with the issue. Keep thinking about solutions, about what changes we can make in our own lives, how we can support others. I think it's just so important. Now, I'm often asked if I'm hopeful about solving climate change. And often my organization, Project Drawdown, talks about hope and that it provides hope. And many people say that they get hope from our work. And I'm often asked if I'm hopeful. And honestly, I can't say that I am always hopeful, given the news and the predictions by scientists and things that I read daily as part of my work. But I also don't believe that hope about climate change is necessary for climate action. For me, there are other areas in my life that inspire hope in me, and areas that generate joy and happiness, awe and reverence. And I use those emotions to fuel my climate work. So even though the climate work itself may not be generating positive emotions, I'm able to cultivate those emotions in other areas and use that to keep me going. Now, I also know that everyone is different. And for many, climate action will be motivated by anger or fear. I know that's a message that's often promoted by Greta Thunberg. That's wonderful for anyone who's motivated by anger or fear. But for others, action will be motivated by love and joy or happiness, or our motivations may change day to day. So I encourage you to bring your full humanity to this work. For me, I think there's enough fear and anger in the world. So that's why I choose to cultivate joy and love and connection. But I recognize that everyone's different. So please trust your own mind. One last thing I want to mention about practice that I think is so important is that in most types of contemplative practice, we cultivate the capacity to see ourselves as not different from others, and we cultivate compassion. And I think this is so important as we look at climate justice and correcting many of the wrongs and oppressions that are systematically in place that have enabled climate change. And so I think that being able to have greater capacity to want to work toward climate justice is a great and fruitful thing that can come from practice. Now I'm going to share my slides again to talk about a suggested template for climate action. So climate change is a systemic problem, and it requires systemic solutions. It can be overwhelming to think about what to do when we want to take action. But I think it's important to remember and understand that there is no single simple answer to the question of what can I do? So I think it's great to start with a simple approach and look at some ways to begin to take action. And if you're someone who's already involved in climate action, then you can bring the knowledge you've gained to that work, but also think about ways to bring others into the movement who have not yet taken action. Global surveys show that most people around the world are concerned about climate change. There's not really much work remaining to do to alarm others in order to inspire them to take action. What we really need to do is focus on solutions at this point. Now, a contemplative practice that I love and find useful for climate work is the Buddhist practice of metta, or of cultivating loving kindness toward all beings. And in this practice, we recite kind intentions, first to ourselves, and then to loved ones, acquaintances, people we don't know, and people we think of as difficult. And the phrases that I use for these kind intentions are, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live at ease. And then in turn, directing these kind intentions toward others. May you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live at ease. I find that these are such soothing statements when thinking about climate change, because these are the main concerns that come up. Will I be safe as the climate changes? Will I still be able to be happy? What about healthy? Will I be healthy? And will I live at ease? It certainly sometimes doesn't seem so. So I love this metta practice as a way to ground myself for climate action. Now, I like this metta structure of starting with self and then moving outward for climate action as well. So I developed what I call climate action metta, and it's a way to look at levels of action. So I think that we can begin most easily and most immediately with climate action in our own households and with our own personal actions. So this is something that you can begin now. Now, of course, we can't solve climate change in our own households alone, but we also should not ignore our power to make a difference. We can also work with others in our communities to make change in our communities. And at this level, we can explore ways that climate action is easier or more powerful or more affordable when more people are involved. Now, businesses, building and land owners, utilities, and institutions have a different level of agency in making change, needed change. And at this level, we can work to educate and influence the businesses where we work and where we shop, influence building and land owners that we are acquainted with, utilities where we get our electricity, and the institutions that we are affiliated with. Or maybe you are a business owner or a building or land owner and you have the leverage to accelerate change. And then we can also help to educate and influence local, state, and federal elected officials. And we can advocate for policy and incentives that can accelerate the adoption of climate solutions. Now, about the majority of global emissions, about 75%, can be reduced directly by the decisions of those who run businesses and utilities, buildings, and governments. But our choices as consumers, energy users, tenants, and voters have direct impact in their own right and can affect those decisions by sending signals across the system. Now, the drawdown solutions analysis reveals that individual and household actions have the potential to produce roughly 25 to 30% of the total emissions reductions that are needed to avoid the greater than 1.5 degree rise in temperature. And these solutions on the slide from the 80 solutions that are part of the drawdown analysis are those that are most actionable by individuals and households. Now, these solutions involve our food choices, how we handle our waste, the ways we travel, and how we manage our energy use. So if you're beginning with the individual and household level of climate meta, these solutions are a good place to start for immediate short-term action. So I mentioned reduced food waste and plant-rich diets as such powerful solutions. So those actually account for the greatest percentage of individual action potential. How we handle our waste by recycling, reducing the amount of plastic that we use, composting, and recycling paper. Our travel is another area of impact. So using public transit, carpooling, electric cars, hybrid cars, telepresence, and electric bicycles. All of these go toward reducing the amount of gasoline that's burned. And then in the area of our energy use, using solar panels on our homes, insulation, LED lighting, solar hot water, high performance glass, high efficiency heat pumps, smart thermostats, and low flow fixtures. Now, I'd like to propose a potential action path. First of all, I suggest that we work together. Do not do climate action alone. As the climate changes and we face greater challenges, we need each other now more than ever. And we can also build more power and influence when we work together. So to address climate change, it will be necessary for all of us to change how we live and work. And it's easier to make changes when we have each other for support. Also, it's just more fun to do things with other people. So you can start by working with the people who you are already connected to, your family, your coworkers, your church members, neighborhood association, alumni groups, clubs, any communities that you're already a part of. You can use those existing relationships to take climate action. So I will pause right now so that if anyone wants to start making a plan now, we can just start to think, who might we want to work together with to take climate action? Now, as a second step on this path, I would suggest this. Consider the co-benefits of climate solutions. So when you're deciding on what solutions you might want to work on, think about the solutions that will improve your life and your community. So is it important for you to save money, to improve your health or the health of those around you, to protect a nearby ecosystem, or to correct an injustice? Here are some examples of co-benefits of climate solutions. When you weatherize your home and switch to LED light bulbs or get solar panels or switch to a smart thermostat, these are all things that can save money, either in the short term or the long run. When you reduce the amount of meat you eat, especially if you're eating large amounts of meat and you're already well nourished, then you can safely reduce this amount of meat and it can improve your health. Let's plenty of medical study to show that this is a good move for your health and the health of those around you. Now, when you take fewer trips by car, meaning you're burning less gasoline, that is cumulatively more healthy for everyone because it reduces air pollution. So one thing that has been happening for decades is that as we drive more and more cars, there's more and more air pollution. And there's been certain times during history where we thought this was bad, but attention drifts away from it. But maybe we should focus more attention on this now because we've sort of become complacent with this notion that we should forfeit healthy air. And then another example is bicycle and walking infrastructure. When we have this in place in cities and even suburban areas, it reduces traffic deaths. So if you go everywhere by car, you may not be aware of how dangerous it is to get around by bicycle or on foot for people who don't own cars. And this is actually an injustice that we can address as part of our climate action. So I think it's a great idea to think about what are prevailing problems in your community and how can they be addressed by climate action. And that I understand this will require a little bit more research just to be able to connect the co-benefits to the climate solutions. But virtually all of them have some benefit beyond the effect on the atmosphere. The next step I would suggest is to choose a solution. So just starting anywhere, take a look at the list of drawdown solutions and see where you might be most comfortable making change. Or maybe you want to choose something that you feel would be a challenge, or maybe an area that you want to learn more about. So this too might already have something in mind, or you may want to research this further or consult with the people who you'll be working with in your community. And then a next step is to learn more. Learn more about either the solution that you've chosen to implement or about what are the things that advance this solution. So climate action has been happening around the world. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Search the internet for information. The questions you might want to explore are, what are the most effective ways to implement this solution? Are there any local programs and incentives that could make this easier or more affordable? What people and organizations are focused on this solution, and what can you learn from them? There are organizations and groups of people who have been working on every area of climate solutions and have information and insights to share. Another thing to consider is, what groups of people and perspectives have you not considered, and how can you bring them into your work? And learn about climate justice. The climate crisis was enabled largely by systems of injustice that allow us to create certain communities that we sacrifice in order to continue the behaviors and practices that also create these huge emissions of greenhouse gases. And then lastly, I call this step act and reflect. So as you take your climate action, also reflect on what successes you've had and what challenges you've faced, and what steps might you want to take next. Who else might you want to bring into your community as you work on this? And does it make sense to move on to the next step of climate meta? For instance, moving from the individual and household level onto the next level of influence. Now, I know that I've shared quite a bit of general information, and part of your climate action will be to fill in the details. But as I said, there are hundreds of organizations that have online information about every sector of climate solutions and groups who have worked for years on advancing solutions. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And so here are a few online resources that you could start with. Just doing a general internet search for climate action guide. Many nonprofits have produced action guides that lay out steps for taking action on solutions. I mentioned that drawdown.org is a great source of information to educate yourself about solutions. Regeneration.org is a new site that lays out specific actions you can take on many of the drawdown solutions. And then Climate Justice Alliance is a very wonderful source of information if you're interested in learning more about advancing justice and looking at the systemic ways to support more fairness, justice, and well-being for all. Now, finally, I'd like to say, please do not underestimate your importance in this movement. We are attempting collaborative global change on a level never before experienced by humanity. Don't sit this one out, but also trust your mind. What will you discover? You may be able to advance the climate movement in a way that you never dreamed. So thank you so much. That's the end of my prepared talks. And I look forward to discussion.
Crystal, thank you so much for the rich presentation and wise insights. We have our first question, which is a dual expression of gratitude and a question, and that is the gratitude for the meta framework for climate action. And the question is, in your own work, how do you incorporate the contemplative practice as you transition from one level to another?
Well, that's a really great question. So I think that just the meta practice is a basic foundation for always, wishing goodwill and loving kindness for others. But I think it's really useful in not wanting to place blame or target anger at others, but helping to understand that this is a collaborative effort to create change, and that we have to look at what's good about every person and help to provide what they need. Often people are not educated about climate change, or they're fearful that they're going to lose their livelihoods, or many other fears. So the meta practice really helps to stay related to other human beings who we're in this together with. And I think that's the main use of it for me, as well as just staying grounded.
And building on that topic area, is this a practice that's done throughout the day as you encounter different emotions, or how is the tempo and timing of the practice characterized?
I think that is completely individual choice.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are some days where I might need it throughout the day, or other days where I may not remember it at all. But I think that's your individual choice, and, whatever works for you and helps you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then we have another question that asks whether there are curricula for young ones in early childhood education venues, such as kindergarten and preschool.
I don't think that there are many. We don't have one developed for the drawdown work and information. and I don't think that there are a lot of curricula out there for early childhood education, but that's really not my area of expertise. So I would say that that's something to search for.
Thank you. I am aware of a children's book that is titled Sparky's Discovery, I think is the title, and it's a book for elementary children about electric vehicles. If anyone knows of other resources, feel free to enter them into the chat. There is another question that asks the following: how does Project Drawdown deal with environmental costs of its recommendations? For example, electric cars and bicycles need batteries which are poorly recycled and raise demand for lithium. Please comment.
So for each, on our website, there is a page for each solution with a link to a technical summary that discusses the financial analysis of that solution and shows the expected costs or savings of the solution. So I would refer you there for those details.
Thank you. Then we have a question that asks about your reference to the Chesapeake Bay. It says, thank you for your inspiring talk. I am from Maryland and enjoyed seeing the Chesapeake Bay front. Can you comment on solutions for people who work really hard on reducing climate greenhouse gas impacts in their life in all respects, but have to fly frequently? How can we compensate for air travel?
Well, I mean, first I would say just to examine the necessity of all of the trips. Is there a way to combine trips? Can you use teleconferencing more? That's become a much more available option since the pandemic. Otherwise, I don't like to talk in terms of offsets or things that you can do to make it okay for other emissions. And I don't mean this in the sense of like creating guilt or anything like that, but it's important to look at, if you're required to fly frequently, then just look at other areas where you might reduce emissions. There may be an opportunity for you to take fewer trips by car or to make dietary changes, reduce your food waste. So I would just say to look at the range of solutions and see where else you might make an impact. There are technologies being developed now to help reduce the amount of emissions that comes from airplanes. So, you know, that might be worth researching.
Thank you. The next question, again, thanks you for the meta framework and your statement that contemplative practice can be used as a place to cultivate refuge, as well as to draw upon the inner resources cultivated by practice to apply that resource to solutions. This person is asking if you could speak to that further, and they're highlighting that the challenge is not technologies, as you said, the technologies exist and solutions exist. The challenge is how to promote a willfulness to care enough about this crisis to act so that a person's self-interest includes the sense of responsibility.
The way that I think that practice is relevant here is that it helps us to be present with something that's difficult. So I think that many people are first exposed to the climate crisis by hearing a doom and gloom presentation or hearing like projections of how awful things are going to be, or they're even faced with just the effects that we're facing now of the natural disasters. And so that can have the effect of making us want to turn away, avoid thinking about something. It's just too overwhelming. So I think that this is where practice is an advantage, that it helps us to stay present with our feelings and with hard and difficult topics. And then the more we can cultivate that, the more that we can help others as well. And then we can, once we have that freedom with our minds, then we can begin to take a look at what steps can I actually take? What changes are actually possible for me? You know, how can I influence others? How can I, you know, promote policy? What changes can I make in my place of work, or can I encourage the owners of the business where I work? I think that this freedom of thinking that practice can give us can allow us to use much more creativity and much more of our rational mind to think about and work on solutions. So I'm certainly not an expert on contemplative practices. There may be those in the audience who will be able to develop more thinking in this area and share it with others, and be able to explore, you know, even greater ways to advance solutions through contemplative practices. I trust your minds. I also want to let you know that many of the graphics that I shared in my presentation are available at drawdown.org for a free download. So if anyone is interested in those graphics, they are available at drawdown.org.
Thank you so much for pointing out that generous reality of the website, Project Drawdown. Our next question reflects on your progression in your meta framework from the individual to the business level and beyond. And the question asks, how might someone begin in the corporate world and support space for reflection and meta practice in a corporate setting?
Wow, that's a big question that I'm not sure is the best. I'm the best person to answer that. I'm sure there's been, you know, thought and writing about that, bringing contemplative practices into business settings. Probably, Tia, you have some resources for that.
Thank you. I think your framework is really novel and pioneering in your design of the meta for climate action, and that will be a great contribution to the existing effort. You are welcome to look at the videos that I mentioned will be available from this year's summit, but there's a library of archived videos at the same URL, which someone will kindly put into the chat from our team. And those videos do include some examples of leadership in corporate settings. There's also an organization titled Mindful Leadership that you might want to look into.
And on that same topic, Project Drawdown has recently published a publication called Climate Solutions at Work, which gives some guidance on bringing climate action into your place of work and also influencing the management of your employer to look at climate action. So perhaps those two, all of those resources together will start to develop a new body of work.
Yes. And someone's written that they recall in my introduction of you that your work with Project Drawdown focuses on communities. Could you say more about what your community work is, and if one wanted to contact you to facilitate community engagement, is there a process for that?
Mm-hmm. So we're really we have a program that's really just under development now to look at what resources are needed by people, groups of people who are just starting on climate action. Is it possible to provide a framework for action similar to the one I provided? What is the necessary information that people need to know about the solution? So that is a right mix of the technical and the not technical to enable people to get engaged with advancing climate solutions. So that's still under development, and I'm happy to talk with anyone about that. And you can reach me at info@drawdown.org, and then your question will be sent on to me.
The next question is at a personal level, and feel free to answer in the manner that is respecting of where you want to speak. You shared the history of your awakening to your love of nature and the history of the land use along the Chesapeake Bay. Could you share a little more about how, in your rich academic training, you wove the thread of your love for nature into your academic life? Many people here in an academic community are interested in the sustaining of the sensation of love as a relationship with nature and the cultivation of academic and scholarly and professional skills.
Mhm. Yeah, I wish that I could say that I planned it all from the beginning, but it's just not the case. My career path kind of evolved as I just pursued my interests and curiosity, and I carried my connection to the natural world along with me as just part of my being. And so I think that really I've just been kind of cosmically placed to do the work I'm doing. And so I know that many people have a career path that they think of when they're children and they stick with that. And then others of us don't necessarily have a plan, and we might pursue something and then find that we want to pursue something else, or we want to find something else that's more interesting. And actually I just really have tried to follow my curiosity and interests, and I've wound up being placed in the right places at the right time.
And in this vein, was contemplative practice a part of childhood, or was it something you sought out at a point as you faced some of the emotions of working in the climate action arena?
Um, um, so I was introduced to meditation when I was 11 years old by my father, who wanted our whole family to meditate together. And so I have had that early exposure, and that's given me, made me predisposed to want to learn more about contemplative practices. So I think that's part of that cosmic thing I was talking about.
Yes, how wonderful that that was part of your childhood.
Yes.
You just see if I've missed any question here. Well, we have one that looks at the topic of interconnectedness across nations and political practices in different countries that may be a country that manufactures something that is helpful equipment for climate solution, yet is manufactured under oppressive conditions and conditions that don't respect human rights.
Mhm.
Could you speak to how Project Drawdown factors in the political atmosphere in some of the recommendations, and if it notes countries that uphold human rights that offer some of the equipment necessary for this implementation of the recommendations?
Mhm. Actually, our Project Drawdowns analysis is not that detailed. So that's not actually something that we highlight for each solution. But I can say that, as I said in the beginning, in order to do this global analysis, certain assumptions are made in the analysis. And one of them is that the appropriate regulations are in place. So that is an excellent question and point well made. And I think that it's so very important. This is a principle of the communities program that I'm developing, that we don't create new sacrifice zones as we pursue solutions. So I think we have to look at ourselves in the United States There's been a lot of human well-being that we've been willing to sacrifice in the name of progress and profit. And we really should not continue that that bad thinking as we pursue climate solutions.
Thank you. The next question again looks at the rubric applied by Project Drawdown and asks from a place of curiosity about the 14% noted in the diagram related to transportation. Specifically, it thanks you for your balanced talk and says, I'm curious, in California and most other parts of our country, transportation comprises nearly half of the carbon footprint. How was the 14% in the diagram calculated?
That comes from like global studies. And so I think those particular statistics came from IPCC statistics. So of course, those numbers will fluctuate by country, by locality, as will the potential of climate solutions. Our analysis is global, but with the recognition that there will be differences in each location. So the differences about the practicality of implementing the solution, the conditions that are needed to advance it, and really all the circumstances around each solution are very specific to the geographic location.
The next question asks whether the meta framework was something you created kindly for this presentation, or if it is also one of the resources available on the Project Drawdown website.
No, so that is specific to me. I have to make clear that that's my thinking, not Project Drawdown. I can't say it's an official position. So.
Well, we'll be happy to put it on the Contemplation by Design website.
Okay.
People can access it there. And then the next question is a very granular question, and it says, I heard that there is some effort to develop feed materials and allow cattle to be fed in a manner that would render less methane. Is there any, do you know anything about such efforts?
Yeah, there have been studies about cattle that are fed seaweed and how that reduces the amount of methane produced by their digestion. So I would suggest, internet search for that information.
Another question is to delineate the resources from Project Drawdown relative to regeneration, and that there appears to be overlap. Is there anything you want to highlight as a distinction?
Okay, so I think this question is referring to regeneration.org that I mentioned. And so the founder of Project Drawdown was, the founders were Paul Hawken and Amanda Ravenhill. And in fact, if you look at the book Drawdown published by Project Drawdown, it has Paul Hawken's name on there as the editor. And he moved on from Project Drawdown to create his next work, a book called Regeneration and accompanying website. So that's really the relationship there, is that we have, the same founder. And then Paul has gone on to develop an additional framework around solving climate change that is focused around this concept of regeneration.
Thank you. Another person highlights the fact that today Stanford is having its first annual Day of Democracy, in which academic classes are not held, so that all of the students and teaching faculty can focus on engaging in the support and the evolution of democracy. Would you speak to your insights and recommendations for how voting rights play a role in solving and addressing the climate crisis?
That was a great question. I hope I'm not getting too far out of my area of expertise, but I think that in addressing climate change, it's really so very important that we take into account the well-being of all human life and all life on Earth. And where we are only upholding and centering a small fraction of positions and voices, I think we're not going to do a good job of that. So I think there's a tie there that it's really time for us to learn how to discover commonalities and be able to work together. And I know this is highly idealistic, but how else are we meant to proceed? I definitely believe in idealism. And we've seen, we've been through this before, a voting rights effort. We've already been through a time in our history where groups of people were denied voting rights, and now we're going through that again. I mean, I just think that it's time for us to, evolve as humans. And I think that this shift in consciousness that we're cultivating with our practice is really key to that. So I hope that has answered the question.
Very effective way of uniting how contemplative practice, democracy, and climate solutions are a fabric that is woven together and will render what humanity and the planet need. Crystal, thank you for your leadership and your tireless devotion to the well-being and health of all life, people, communities, and the planet. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.